in my opinion, the most uninspiring non-announcement from their weekend. This was billed as their first election policy. And what was it? Sort of a status quo. I don't know how you can claim it as a policy, but it was along the lines of, we'll just keep what we're doing. So in other words, the policy is to change nothing.
Labor's promising if it wins the next election, the age of eligibility for superannuation will stay at 65. The pledge came as the party went into political attack mode at its annual conference.
True. Lots of attacks in the weekend. Interesting.
A public poll revealed National and ACT in front. We'll hear more about the election jibes from political editor Jessica Mackay, but first, her report.
Welcome to the election campaign.
Today, Labor is drawing a line in the sand. Unlike National and ACT, today I am confirming that we will not be lifting the age of eligibility for New Zealand superannuation.
Māori and Pacific have a lower life expectancy and experts say it's...
So I want to debate this a little bit, but the idea that our first policy announcement is there will be no changes feels like a bit of a swing and a miss. You know, it's like, I guess technically it's a policy, and the policy is we're keeping it as, so they have to write something for it. Well, I guess they don't have to write something for it because it's already done. I just felt it was a bit of a, you know, if you're going to come out for like the first election policy, I would have liked to have seen something inspiring, something new, something courageous. And it is like, no, we're just not changing anything. Same old, same old. That's the first one. So I don't know. I feel a little bit blah about it. I mean, obviously there's lots to come, but I just thought for their party conference, for their big weekend, for the launch of it, it was a bit meh sort of thing.
I mean, it's good.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
it's good. It's just not exciting.
Yeah, it's not exciting, and it's not actually a policy. It's not a policy change, at least. I mean, every other party is bringing out what they would do, and what Labor has said is this is what we've done, and they continue to do so.
Hard slog for those in physical jobs.
We know that there are many people that don't arrive at age 65 in great shape, and they may not be able to continue to work.
But National's campaigning on raising the age to 67 by 2044.
Chris Hipkins is hypocritical Hipkins because he campaigned in the past on raising the super...
It's a fair criticism. Fair's fair.
That's also a sick nickname.
Yeah.
I'm going to give him that one.
All right. But fair's fair. You know, that's what he was absolutely. He has said it in the past. It needs to raise, and when they're not doing quite so well in the polls, all of a sudden, I don't know, we're not going to change it. It's a completely fair criticism.
For age, he knows it is the responsible thing to do economically and fiscally and socially.
Can we really afford this?
As long as we keep investing in the super fund.
She says 30-year-olds will suffer when they reach retirement.
Wrong answer. Chloe Swarbrick will explain the right answer shortly. It's got nothing to do with as long as we keep investing. It is where is the money going to come from to pay for an aging population? How is it going to be invested? Where is it coming from? And I think we all know about the kinds of taxes that need to come into this country, but we'll let Chloe explain that shortly.
Under National and ACT.
If you're a young person, I have to say this to you. The coalition of cuts will take more than $98,000 off your retirement.
If you're 30 and you're earning the average wage, under ACT you'd be over $80,000 better off before you retire, thanks to our tax cuts.
It's a hot topic.
I don't think we should raise it at all. I don't think people should be forced to keep working beyond this particular age.
I think 65.
And when, you know, in all honesty, it's probably a good idea.
To put it up.
I'd say so, yeah.
Labor has switched to campaign attack mode after our One News poll 2 days ago showed National and ACT in front.
It's like they're the most rubbish Marvel comic ever invented. Chris
Not
Luxon
comedy.
as Captain Cliche,
Don't try to
and
comedy.
his sidekick David Seymour as reverse Robin Hood. So
I don't think Grant Robertson understands that Robin Hood is not a character from Marvel, but, you know, maybe that's just me.
Be warned, everything is at stake.
I think the Labor Party is running scared.
MPs reckon the poll's a good wake-up call.
Voters are going to are still making up their minds.
I think Chippy's really connected with Kiwis over the last few months since he became the leader. I think he's got a sparkle in his eye.
Elections like 2020 don't come around very often, and this one's back to a good old-fashioned MMP election, and we've got to be in it.
The party faithful have some advice.
Connecting with our communities, grassroots type.
I think a lot of people are very frightened about a National Act government, and I certainly am.
There's also a bit of nervousness, obviously, for any close election that's there, but there's a positive feeling.
Nervousness that's only going to ramp up.
There you go. So a couple of things, Chewie, and I think maybe you and I will have a slightly different position on this from the sounds of our banter, is that they're right that the retirement age can't stay at 65 if the tax code stays as it is right now. Right? That there's a caveat to that. So either the tax code has to change or the retirement age has to go up. Those two things are like keeping the tax as it is and the age as it is incongruent. You can't do that. So either tax has to go up or age has to go up. Now, Labor at the moment is talking about not adding any taxes, nothing like that, and keeping the age at the same. So actually, there's lots of criticisms at the moment which are fairly laid at the feet of Labor over this, Chewie.
Yeah, like a lot of these things, they try to boil it down to it has to be one thing or the other, right? We have to, if we're going to afford any retirement age at all, we've got to put it up to 67. Or if we're going to keep it where it is, then we need to keep paying into the super fund. But it is other things as well. It's changing the tax brackets. It's making sure that the wealthy are paying their fair share, which, as we've discussed on the show before, they are not.
Yeah.
By and large, like all of these things that we want are things that we have had in the past and are things that we can have again if we stop buying into this bullshit that for the economy to work, the rich must be left alone. It does not work.
Here's an interesting stat for you as well. This is an interesting stat to add to the debate, right? The age has been 65. It would have got raised incrementally to 65 starting in 1991. In 1990, average life expectancy in New Zealand was 76. So if it was 76, right, that means if you retired at 60, that's 16 years. Average life expectancy today is almost 83, 82.8. That means if you retire at 65, you've actually got, what's that, 83? That's 18 years, potentially. So actually, we, meaning society, is better off today. We have a longer, according to the stats, I know people die young and I'm down for all of that, but according to the stats, we live longer post-retirement today than we lived post-retirement when it was 60. Now, it also means, and I've heard the Commissioner of Retirement talk about this several years ago, if you raise the age over 20 years, in 20 years' time, you probably will see no difference in the life expectancy post retirement age increase as to today. So for example, if they raised it over 20 years or 15 years or whatever, up 2 years, in that same time period, our life expectancy will have gone up by 2 years. So therefore, it's a little bit of a zero-sum total. You know, there's not a big difference with the numbers. Just to put that into this conversation as well. We can look as well now as what I think it was this morning on breakfast. Chloe and Rimmer were on the show, and the question was asked. I thought this was going to be a quick clip, like 2 or 3 minutes. They actually go for a full 5 minutes, which was quite a lot on TVNZ or News Hub to put towards this. And the thing about it is, I don't think both sides are correct and both sides are wrong, because I think there needs to be a way to pay for an aging population, and the current system won't do it. So either the system needs to change, and I guess what I'm putting out there is, you know, and I think Chloe does as well, you know, it's capital gains tax, it's wealth tax, it's those sorts of things, or we put it up. To me, that seems quite an easy thing to do. And also remember, if we put it up by 2 years, over 20 years, there won't be much of a difference between retirement age and life expectancy. Now, they're just numbers. I understand that there's going to be an emotive response to this, and I am perfectly happy to keep it at 65. But I think that it's a broader conversation than just, it needs to go up because we can't afford it, and it needs to stay where we are because of the vulnerable. It's a more nuanced conversation than that. Do you want to say anything before we push play, Chewie?
No, go. Yeah, hit it.
All right. So this is the direct question from Anna Burns-Francis.
Would you raise the age of super?
No, it's not Green Party policy. And I think actually, again, if you're to look at the data, what we have is amongst the lowest rates of elderly poverty in the developed world as a result of universal superannuation. If we want to deal with the issue of the cost of super,
she's very
then
hard
we should
to
be
argue
looking
with,
at our tax
just
earnings,
quietly.
because we know that if you want to reduce bureaucratic and administrative costs, the best way to do that is to universalise and make these systems work better in the first place.
Well, look, we've said consistently the age has to rise, and I know it's not always popular. There'll be people saying, don't you dare. But the truth is that while Labor and National swap positions, you know, when Labor's in opposition, they say that they'll raise it, then in government they won't. National and government said they won't. Now they're in opposition, they say.
And that's true. That's exactly what both the major parties do.
America, Britain, Australia, Germany, Israel, Ireland, Italy, Spain, I mean, practically Taiwan, practically the whole developed world recognises that people are living longer and longer, they're healthier, people are working longer, and they're also having fewer children, so there's less taxpayers to actually pay the tax. Now, that gives you a simple mathematics that nearly every...
So he's made a comment that we can test. Practically the whole of the developed world. So here is the whole of the developed world and their retirement ages. He's wrong, because if you actually have a look, there's where 65 kicks in, right? And this is just, I've listed this in order of ages, so that at the moment there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 countries in the world whose age is higher than 65. So that's not practically the whole of the developed world.
No.
So that's flat out wrong. Now, that doesn't take away from the debate, but we want to be accurate that what he just said is either a lie or he doesn't have the facts. And if you have a look at the 65 and below, these are all 65 and below. You know, you can see when it says 63.83, what that means is Czech Republic is in the throngs of raising it to what, I'm not sure, but at the moment 62, there's 60, you know, Indonesia's 58. So he's not accurate with what he's saying. Just to be clear about the whole of the developed world is basically in agreement with this idea. It's not the case, not according to the numbers at least anyway.
Every other country recognises, and yet no other political party in New Zealand will. In our alternative budget, we increase the age of eligibility for superannuation by 2 months a year. That means that someone who's currently 60 would get super not in 5 years, but in 5 years and 10 months.
A lot of those countries you talk about do have a wealth tax, though.
Here's the conversation.
Well, no, they don't.
Well, at least the comprehensive capital gains
no,
tax,
they
and
don't.
3 of them.
Some of them have capital gains taxes. That's true. However, if we buy into your logic, and I don't, but if we buy into your logic, then you would think that they would be able to afford super at 65. They don't, and that is all the more reason why New Zealand needs to get with that program. But unfortunately, there's no other political party that has the courage to say things, even when they're unpopular.
They're just so courageous, HOE. You know, the way they fight for the little guy, and
so
they take all those, they take all those risky positions that needs an amount of bravery and stuff to do it. They never do the populist thing, just dog whistling to their audience, but they're so brave. So special, so brave.
Facts don't add up. We need to change, and it's actually going to be easier if we start making the change earlier than if we wait and wait and wait and say, if only someone had had the courage to say that 5 years ago.
How do you balance out the inequity then? Because I think, you know,
Great
you're probably going to be
question.
fine to keep working a couple of years. You'll be fine. I'll
Great
be fine.
question.
Other people won't. Māori life expectancy is much lower than mine as a Pākehā woman. How do you balance out the inequity?
Well, first of all, you know, that argument applies now. So in theory...
that doesn't make it right, though.
So maybe
So that response to that argument implies now, basically what he's saying is, so fuck it. It applies now, so we don't worry about it. That's what that means.
There should be, you know, a lower retirement age for men. I mean, women live longer. People in the South Island actually live longer. People
Are you
different
advocating
jobs.
for some of these changes now then? You're saying the system isn't perfect now.
What I'm telling you is that each person has...
One of the differences there, though, and this is something that you'll never get ACT to actually agree on, is that we don't have a binding contract with people in the South Island. We don't have a binding contract between men and women. We have a contract between the Crown and Māori. So even if all of those information is technically correct, we don't have a binding agreement with South Islanders, therefore they have to be included within legislation. Although they should be, shouldn't they, Joey? All South Islanders. But do you know what I'm saying? That's the difference. The difference is there is an agreement with Māori, an agreement that many would say has not been lived up to, and that actually does apply differently to other subsets of New Zealand. That's why we don't typically, when we're talking about this sort of thing, we don't typically reference, Asian life expectancy in New Zealand. We don't have a binding contract with, China's mainland or ancestors of Japan or ancestors of the Philippines. We do with Māori. So therefore, we have a contractual arrangement that works through government. So we need to include that contract signee, signatory, if that is a word, in the legislation we're making. And he'll never accept that. But I'm just saying bluntly, that's the difference. That's the difference. Play for me.
As choices about how they live their life.
Not all of them are choices.
You want to put
circumstance dictates your choices.
You want to put people into categories, and I'm just showing you how absurd it is. In theory, there could be a different type of superannuation age for every demographic type of person. Well, the truth is that that's a nonsense, and you don't want to take it
There's
where it
already
leads.
a category, your age.
The second thing is, no, there's one age you want to categorise.
But that's a category. The category is you have to be over the age of 65.
No, the categorisations that you're talking about, your ethnicity, your gender, maybe your work type or whatever.
This is actually quite interesting. You don't see David Seymour flustered very often. He's flustered here. He's like, you're saying, and Anna Burns-Francis hasn't said anything. She's asked a couple of questions. And remember, this is also the party and the part of the political spectrum that goes, they're just questions. Why are you pushing we've got the right to ask questions. They're just questions. And she's asking him really fair questions, especially because if society's only as strong as its weakest link, we do need to think of the vulnerable. And we do need to go, how will this legislation impact the 10% at the bottom, however you want to word it? And he's flustered. He's flustered in this, and his response to being flustered, she hasn't been aggressive, they're perfectly valid questions, is basically him on some level going, well, you're saying this, and she's like, no, I'm not, and she's not. But you don't often see him flustered, and I think I get the vibe that he's fairly flustered in this conversation, Chewy.
Yeah, I've seen that from him before. He'll go on the attack, whether it's a warranted attack or not. And when it's not deserved, when it is something that hasn't been said, it sticks out like nobody's business. You don't see it often. He doesn't let himself get cornered in this way very often, or he doesn't have an interviewer that is able to corner him in this way.
But this isn't even a big corner.
You love to see it, though.
This is even pretty simple. This is the thing that's interesting, is that he hasn't really been trapped. He's just been asked obvious questions. If we raise the age, what about the vulnerable? That's really the only question. That's not a gotcha. That's a really simple question. And yeah, people are mentioning the word flustered. Yeah, he's flustered in this.
Making the point that nobody is seriously talking about categorising people.
So you wouldn't deal with the inequity.
Just like
so you wouldn't deal with the inequity.
And no party seriously suggesting that they would, except for the Maori Party, who make everything about race. I'm saying that the current age is unsustainable, and the issues of categorising people and putting people into boxes, I think people have had enough of that. Each of us are human. Each of us have choices and chances in life. The question for New Zealand is, are we going to have a superannuation scheme that is sustainable, that gives younger people a fair go, or are we going to try and be a global outlier, despite being poorer than many of those countries I mentioned, tax young people harder and see them off to Australia, where, by the way, the superannuation age is being raised to 67?
I don't know that they deal with their Indigenous equity all that well either, David.
Well, with the greatest of respect, I mean, what's that got to do with it?
Well, that's what we're talking about, the whole fact that there is an inequity in the system.
What's that got to do with it is that was the question you were asked. That's actually, even if you don't think it does, the question you were asked was about that, so that's what it's got to do with it. And as I said before, he's flustered because it's a really fair question, and ACT has no response to that, because if you start talking about how do we look after the vulnerable, you immediately have to go into who's vulnerable. You immediately have to go into why they're on the bottom of the pile and all these stats. You immediately have to acknowledge Māori, for example, are disproportionately negatively impacted by these things, life expectancy, Chewy.
It's the thing that ACT, they try to cling to this, right? Oh, it's equality. It's equality. Everybody's treated the same. Yeah, everybody's treated the same, and there's absolutely no consideration given to anything else apart from everybody gets treated the same. Now, how many times would you go out and, one size fits all actually fits all?
Yeah.
Here's the one dinner that you can have. Do you like it? It's the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
Many people love this meal. Why don't you love this meal? Well, I guess you'll starve and die then. This is the big thing, that equality is not everything that's cracked up to be, because life is not equal.
Yeah, and the thing that one of the things that
equity
that Ella Byrne Francis, whatever her name, Byrne Francis, what's her first name? Anna Byrne Francis said quite clearly, was that he pushed past all of her points. And there were some good questions in there that he was just pushing past. And at the end, she just basically said, "So you wouldn't deal with inequity?" And he said, "Well, no." Yeah. I mean, at least he's honest. The other thing that's kind of fantastic about this conversation is it does draw a line in the sand pretty clearly. A vote for National is a vote for raising the retirement age. A vote for Labor is a vote for keeping the retirement age where it is. So it does make a good demarcation line for people when it comes to their voting. I missed the chat, but there was someone in the chat that just, there we go, Peter. And he's right. Chloe is looking very comfortable. And I think we've got about 60 seconds to go on this conversation. We'll basically let her wrap it up, shall we? Chloe's last part of this conversation.
And again, but you seem okay with it. If we're to reflect on the broader context, and that being our economic rules and setup, it is the case that we are an outlier
he even looks
internationally with
uncomfortable
regard to not having a capital gains tax, inheritance tax, or wealth tax, or any other form of taxation, which also seeks to deal with some of those intergenerational inequities. So fundamentally, I think that the problem should be actually addressing our economy and our tax settings, and then we can actually start to put in place rules that enable us all to live far better, healthier lives in the first place. And when we're looking at the superannuation age and whether we should raise it or otherwise, what is the point of us developing and evolving as a society, of us having these productivity gains or otherwise, if we're only going to continue working longer and longer for more hours?
There you go.
Queen! Yeah. Just call it. Just give her the crown. That's all I'm like. Oh my God. Every time she's not on camera in that interview, I feel like she's going to come over the back of that couch with a steel chair.
Yeah, I was just thinking off the top rope.
Yeah.
Yeah. And look,
she is so good at this stuff.
Yeah. And I wonder if she would be, if she wasn't in the Greens, I wonder if she would be earmarked as a future Prime Minister. She won't be as a part of the Greens, but there's lots of politicians that you can disagree with their policies, but you can see the quality of them as orators, as politicians, what they're doing, clear, concise, etc., etc. She's one of them. She really is. And what Peter said in the chat, looks so comfortable. She probably looked comfortable because both Anna Byrne Francis and herself were kind of dismantling David Seymour. But it was very, very interesting. Is there anything in the chat we want to get to before we move on? Because we've actually got a few other stories.
Rose just made an interesting. Close your eyes and listen. She sounds just Jacinda, like Jacinda, just faster. And yes, she does sound like Jacinda 2.0, and I think that's a bloody good thing. I like Chloe a lot. I think she's got hopefully a long career in politics ahead of her, and hopefully she gets some wins on the board. DIY Guru, David Seymour's reckon of increased personal wealth after tax cuts doesn't include additional cost of public service cuts.
Right.
So, sure, you get all of this tax back, apparently from David Seymour's magical money tree, from not getting taxed. But of course, do you have to go into private healthcare? Are our hospitals falling over? Can the country no longer afford preventative health care? Will you die before your retirement age anyway? These are the things. Like it's whenever Seymour is talking, it sounds wonderful, doesn't it? On a personal thing, you personally don't have to pay as much tax. You personally don't have the government coming up with rules for you. This wonderful libertarian society. It doesn't describe how everything else is falling down around you.
Yeah.
You can live in a lovely libertarian society where no one comes to pick up your trash and you're on your front doorstep with a gun because there's no police. That's libertarian.
Jack reckons maybe PM anyway. She'll never be PM if she's with the Greens. It's not going to happen. Unless some multiverse in the future, Labor needed the Greens to get in, and Greens had enough sway even as a minor party to have. Maybe deputy PM would be about as high. If you're a Green Party member, that's about as high as you would ever get. I like what Emma says. I wish I could bring Chloe along to all my family barbecues.
Is it that the metric for a prime minister though?
Have a beer.
Would you go to a barbecue with them?
Yeah. All right.
Yep.
Okay.
Look, I think just before we move away from this,
Yep.
these interviews with ACT and the Greens, they are so important. We are going to hear about preferred prime minister. We're going to hear major party policies or lack thereof all the way through. But it is these two parties that are going to decide who the government is.
Yep.
We all need to pay a lot more attention to what Rimmer is saying.
Yeah.
And give a lot more credence to what Chloe is saying. Because it's those policies, it's the ones that they hold really close that they're going to go, well, we'll support you for government, but this pet project has to come in.
And there are conversations that we've heard from people saying Rimmer wants to be the Minister of Finance. So put that in your pockets, mate.
Good God.